Some mornings, the silence in a house feels different. Not peaceful, not calm, just heavy, like the walls are holding their breath, waiting for something to break. That's what it felt like when I woke up that day, even though everything on the surface seemed normal. The coffee pot was gurgling. The clock ticked its steady rhythm on the wall. Theo was in the shower humming a tune I didn't recognize. And yet, inside me, there was this cold, sinking feeling that something was horribly wrong. I wish I could tell you it came out of nowhere. But the truth is, deep down, I had been feeling it for a while. Little things, the way he avoided my eyes sometimes when we talked, the way he stayed late at work more and more, the way his phone never left his side anymore, but I ignored it because we were happy, weren't we? My name's Rachel, I'm 27 years old, and until recently, I thought I had it all. A loving husband, a stable career, a future so bright I could barely stand to look directly at it. Theo and I had been together since college. We met during our last semester, two stressed-out seniors who bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap coffee. It wasn't some sweeping love story. It was simple, easy, comfortable. We graduated, found jobs, moved in together, got married 3 years ago in a small, intimate ceremony under the oak trees at my parents' house. It felt right. It felt permanent. After a few years of settling into married life, Theo brought up the idea of starting a family. I remember the way his eyes lit up when he said it, like he was offering me a dream, wrapped up with a neat little bow, and I wanted it. I wanted that dream. So we tried. Month after month, timing everything just right. Hoping, praying, laughing about it sometimes when the pressure got too much, and finally, it happened. 2 months ago, I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test and thought my heart might burst from how much love it held. Theo seemed thrilled. He kissed me, spun me around the kitchen, told me I was going to be the most amazing mom in the world. I believed every word. Looking back now, I wonder if he even believed them himself. We agreed to keep the pregnancy private at first, just close family and a few friends. Theo said he wanted to wait until the second trimester to announce it publicly. I didn't think much of it at the time. It made sense, right? Protect the news, protect the joy. But then came the message. It was a Saturday afternoon. We were curled up on the couch, half watching a movie. Theo's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Normally, I wouldn't have even looked. But the screen lit up right in my line of sight. A text from a coworker. "Are you really okay with the pregnancy?" I blinked. Maybe I misread it. Maybe it was some weird inside joke. Theo picked up his phone quickly, read the message, and set it face down without a word. And that was when the cold knot in my stomach tightened into something sharp and jagged. I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid, hormonal, irrational. But that night, after Theo fell asleep, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Lying there in the dark, feeling the soft, steady flutter of life growing inside me. I realized I didn't trust him. Not fully, not anymore. So, with my heart pounding so loudly, I was sure it would wake him. I picked up his phone. I told myself I just needed to ease my mind, that I would look, find nothing, and feel stupid for doubting him. But that's not what happened. I found messages, hundreds of them, conversations between Theo and one of his work friends talking about a new employee named Natasha. I had met her once at an office party. Pretty smart, bubbly, in a way that made you like her instantly. I never thought twice about her. Theo had in the messages, he talked about how attractive he found her, how easy it was to be around her compared to me, how he dreaded coming home every night but forced himself to because I was pregnant, how he hated sleeping beside me but didn't want to raise any red flags, how he fantasized about what he would do if Natasha ever made a move. I sat there scrolling and scrolling, feeling pieces of myself fall away with every word. It wasn't just attraction, it was contempt, it was resentment, it was emotional abandonment dressed up in casual jokes and venting to a friend, and it wasn't new. The earliest messages dated back 8 months. Before Theo suggested having a baby, which meant when he told me he wanted to start a family. When he kissed my belly and whispered promises, he was already halfway out the door. I felt like I was drowning in the living room. I curled up on the couch, phone clutched against my chest, sobbing so quietly it barely made a sound. It was like the walls themselves were grieving with me. When the sun started to rise, casting pale light across the carpet, I still hadn't slept. And somehow I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after I found the messages, I stayed curled up on the couch, numb. Theo walked out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes, yawning like nothing had changed. When he saw me, his eyebrows pulled together in confusion. "Why are you sleeping out here?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my throat locked up. He moved toward me, reaching out like he always did, like maybe a hug could erase everything. I flinched away so hard that he froze in place. I finally found my voice cracked and broken as it was. "You don't have to pretend anymore," I whispered. "I know about Natasha. I know everything." For a moment, the room was so silent I could hear the refrigerator humming. Theo didn't deny it. He didn't scramble to explain. He just stared at me, shoulders sagging, eyes full of something, guilt maybe, or maybe just the fear of being caught. That silence cut deeper than any excuse he could have given. It told me all I needed to know. I stood up on shaky legs, walked past him into the kitchen, pretended to pour a glass of water. I couldn't even bring myself to drink. Behind me, Theo spoke finally. "It's not what you think," he said, voice low. I almost laughed. Because wasn't it always not what you think? I turned around slowly, the glass trembling in my hand. "Then tell me," I said, biting down hard on the tears threatening to spill over. "Explain to me why you said you hated sleeping next to me. Why you said you wouldn't stop Natasha if she made a move. Explain why you started a family with me while fantasizing about someone else." Theo opened his mouth, closed it again, sat down heavily at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the glass against the wall and watch it shatter into a million tiny pieces, just like my heart had. Instead, I sat across from him and waited. After what felt like forever, he finally looked up. "I thought having a baby would fix things," he said, just like that, like it was reasonable, like it was understandable. "I thought it was just a phase." He continued, voice barely above a whisper, "that if we had something bigger, something real, it would bring us back together. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to lose what we had." I stared at him, stunned. "So you thought trapping me with a baby would solve everything?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "You thought pretending would make the problems disappear?" Theo winced, but he didn't answer. And in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't just weak, he was selfish. He wasn't trying to save us. He was trying to save himself from feeling guilty, from having to face the reality that he had fallen out of love with me. And now, because of that cowardice, I was carrying the child of a man who didn't love me, who didn't even like me anymore. It felt like drowning in slow motion. I stood up, heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm leaving," I said. Theo's head snapped up. "Rachel, wait," but I was already moving. I threw some clothes into a duffel bag, no careful folding, no second guessing. Just grabbing stuffing, trying to outrun the heartbreak clawing at my heels. Theo followed me to the door, begging, apologizing, promising to fix it. But it was too late. You can't glue a shattered mirror back together and pretend it's the same. I drove to my parents' house in a daze. Every streetlight, every familiar landmark blurred past me. I barely remembered pulling into the driveway. My dad opened the door before I even rang the bell. One look at me, at my swollen red eyes, my trembling hands, and he knew. He didn't ask questions. He just wrapped me in the kind of hug that made me feel for the first time in days, like maybe I wasn't completely alone. Later that night, curled up in my childhood bed, I let it all out. I cried until my throat was raw, until my body ached from the effort. Cried for the husband I thought I had. Cried for the life I thought we were building. Cried for the baby growing inside me. The baby who would never have the family I had dream for them, and when there were no tears left, just an empty, aching hollow inside me, I knew I couldn't go back. Not just for me, but for my child, because they deserved better than being born into a house built on lies, and so did I. The days that followed were some of the strangest of my life. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an entirely different world. A world I never planned to step into, but now had no choice but to face. At first, everything felt unreal. I would wake up in my childhood bedroom, sunlight filtering through the curtains I had once picked out as a teenager, and for half a second, I'd forget where I was, forget why I was there, forget the huge gaping wound in my chest, and then it would all come rushing back. The nausea, the grief, the anger. There was no going back. Theo tried to reach out, of course. At first, he called, left voicemails, each one a little more desperate than the last. "Please, Rachel, we can work through this." It didn't mean anything. "I still love you." Empty words. I didn't respond. Then came the texts, long walls of apology promises, excuses, and then shorter, angrier ones. When I still didn't reply, I blocked his number after the third night, and still. The silence wasn't enough to drown him out of my mind completely. It would have been so easy to fall back into old habits, to listen to the fear whispering that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was ruining something that could still be saved. But every time those doubts crept in, I remembered the messages, his words, the cruelty behind them. The way he had been slipping away from me long before I even knew it, I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't crazy. I was waking up. And with that awakening came a fierce protective instinct I had never known I was capable of. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore, I was fighting for the tiny life growing inside me. A few days after moving back home, I sat down with my parents at the kitchen table. The same one where I had done homework, the same one where Theo had once shared Thanksgiving dinner with my family, and I told them everything. Everything, the texts, the betrayal, the lies. My dad sat in stunned silence, his jaw tight. My mom cried quietly, her hand over her mouth. When I was finished, my dad stood up, walked over, and placed his hands on my shoulders. "You're not going back," he said firmly. "You're not doing this alone. We'll help you every step of the way." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. We called my uncle that afternoon. He's a lawyer, and by the next morning, I was sitting across from a divorce attorney laying out my case. I had proof, screenshots, dates, conversations. It wasn't physical infidelity, maybe, but emotional betrayal was just as real and sometimes even more devastating. My lawyer was calm, methodical. She explained my options in clear, measured tones: file for divorce immediately, request full custody, protect myself and my child. I agreed to everything without hesitation. I didn't want alimony. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want his apology. I just wanted freedom, peace, a chance to rebuild on my own terms. We filed the papers a week later. Theo was served at his office. I heard about it through a mutual friend, how he had looked stunned, how he left work early that day. Part of me felt guilty, but a bigger part of me felt lighter. Of course, the guilt didn't last long because that's when Theo's family started getting involved. First, it was polite messages from his mother. "Please reconsider. He made a mistake. You owe it to the baby to keep the family together." When I didn't respond, the messages became less polite. Accusations, blame. They claimed I was being cruel, that emotional infidelity wasn't real cheating, that Theo was a good man who deserved another chance. I blocked them too. I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped into staying in a broken marriage, not for appearances, not for their comfort, especially not for a man who didn't even have the decency to be honest with me when it mattered most. Meanwhile, my belly was growing. My body was changing, preparing to bring a new life into the world, and I was changing too. For the first time in a long time, I started to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts, to believe that I deserved better. Not because I was perfect, but because everyone deserves honesty, loyalty, and respect in a relationship. There were moments, fleeting, painful ones, where I mourned what could have been. When I imagined Theo showing up to doctor's appointments, holding my hand through labor, building a nursery together. But those moments were quickly replaced by reality. That man never really existed, not the way I thought he did. I was mourning a ghost, and I knew I couldn't build a future on the ashes of a lie. So I kept moving forward, one shaky step at a time, building a new life, a new dream for me and my baby. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible. But every time I felt like giving up, I would press my hand to my growing belly and remind myself, I'm not just doing this for me, I'm doing this for us, and I will not let the past steal our future. Not now, not ever. Healing doesn't come all at once. It doesn't arrive like some grand sweeping moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's slower than that, messier, more human. And honestly, there were a lot of days when I wasn't sure if I was healing at all. After filing for divorce and asking for full custody, things got harder before they got easier. Theo didn't take it quietly. At first, I thought maybe he would accept it, that deep down he would understand why I was doing this. But when his lawyer responded, it became clear he was going to fight me for custody, for control. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was his family whispering in his ear that he had to make things right in their eyes. I don't know. All I know is that suddenly my pregnancy, already hard enough to navigate emotionally, became a legal battleground. There were mediation sessions scheduled, meetings with court-appointed counselors, emails exchanged at all hours. Each session felt like reopening a wound I was desperately trying to let heal. Sitting across from Theo in those sterile conference rooms, pretending to be civil. Pretending not to remember every cruel thing he had said behind my back, it took everything I had not to fall apart. He looked different too, tired, defeated. Part of me wanted to pity him, but a bigger part remembered. He had made his choices, and now I was making mine. At one particularly tense session, Theo asked to speak to me alone. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Standing awkwardly in the hallway outside the mediator's office, he tried again to apologize, told me he still cared about me, told me he didn't want things to be ugly between us. And for a second, For a tiny fleeting second, I almost softened, because the truth is, you don't just stop loving someone overnight, even when they hurt you, even when they betray you. But then I looked at him, really looked, and I remembered. I remembered the texts, the lies, the way he had talked about me like I was some burden he couldn't wait to escape. I remembered that the only reason he was here fighting now was because he didn't want to lose. Not because he loved me, not because he was sorry. And I said calmly, quietly, "If you're really sorry, Theo signed the papers. Let me go. Let us go." He didn't respond, just turned and walked back inside, and I knew then I had made the right choice. That night, I sat by the window in my parents' living room, cradling my growing belly in my hands. Outside, the world moved on, cars passing, people laughing on the sidewalk, life unfolding as if nothing extraordinary was happening. Inside, I whispered to the tiny life growing inside me, "I promise you, you'll never have to beg for love, not from me." A few days later, my lawyer called Theo had agreed to the divorce. There would still be negotiations about custody, of course, but the hardest part, breaking the tie that bound us, was finally done. It didn't feel like victory, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for far too long. I cried when I hung up the phone, not out of sadness, not even out of relief, really. I cried because it was the end of something and the beginning of something else, something that was mine. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding. Little by little, I went to prenatal classes. I decorated a small nursery in the corner of my childhood bedroom. Soft pastels, stuffed animals, a mobile that played a gentle lullaby. I laughed with my friends again, real, genuine laughter that didn't feel forced or hollow. I started journaling, pouring out all the tangled thoughts and fears and hopes that had nowhere else to go. Some nights, the loneliness still hit me like a freight train. Lying in bed, feeling the baby kick against my ribs, I would wonder what life might have looked like if Theo had been different, if he had loved me the way I deserved, if we had built the family I once dreamed of. But then I would press my hand to my stomach and feel that tiny flutter of life, and I would remember, this wasn't the ending. This was the beginning, and maybe, just maybe, it would be even more beautiful than anything I had ever imagined. It's strange how life has this quiet way of stitching you back together when you're not even looking. 6 months after leaving Theo, I gave birth to my daughter, Lily Grace. She came into the world on a rainy afternoon, her tiny cries filling the sterile hospital room louder and more powerful than I ever could have imagined. When the nurse placed her in my arms, something inside me shifted. Snapped back into place. It wasn't that all the hurt disappeared. It wasn't that I suddenly felt healed or whole or fearless. It was simply that, for the first time in so long, I felt anchored, rooted in something real. Lily was my beginning, not just hers. Theo came to the hospital. He held Lily for a few minutes, awkward and unsure, his hands trembling slightly. I watched him carefully, not out of bitterness, but out of protectiveness. This tiny human in my arms, she was everything, and it was my job to make sure she was safe, even from her own father, if I had to. To his credit, Theo didn't push. He didn't ask for anything more than the time we had agreed upon. He congratulated me quietly, then left. After an hour, giving me and Lily space to bond. And honestly, I was grateful for that. The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, feedings, diaper changes, and aching exhaustion I hadn't known was possible. But even in the chaos, there was so much beauty. Lily's tiny hand curling around my finger, her sleepy sighs against my chest, the way her eyes, so wide, so full of wonder, seemed to see right through all the broken parts of me and love me anyway. I didn't think about Theo much. He visited a few times a week as part of our custody agreement. We kept things civil, professional, polite strangers tied together by blood. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when bitterness threatened to creep in, when I saw glimpses of the man I had once loved and wondered if things could have been different. But those moments passed quickly, because now I had something far more important to focus on. Lily gave me a reason to keep moving forward, and so I did. I went back to work after my maternity leave ended, balancing late-night feedings with early morning meetings. It wasn't easy. There were days I showed up to Zoom calls with spit up on my shirt and bags under my eyes big enough to pack for a weekend trip. But I made it work. Somehow, with every small victory, every bedtime, Lily drifted off in my arms, every paycheck that covered the bills, every smile that lit up her tiny face. I felt a little stronger, a little more sure of myself. Theo, from what I heard through mutual friends, started dating Natasha not long after our divorce finalized. Good for them, I guess. Honestly, I didn't care. I didn't wish them well. I didn't wish them harm. I just let them go. They weren't part of my story anymore. My story was Lily. My story was me. One evening after putting Lily down for the night, I sat out on my parents' porch, a cup of cold coffee in my hands, listening to the crickets sing. The air smelled like rain, fresh, clean, like a new beginning. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't feel like a woman abandoned or betrayed or pitied. I felt like a mother. I felt like a survivor. I felt like myself, stronger, wiser, softer, and somehow even more full of hope than I had ever been before. Was it the life I had imagined for myself? No, not even close. But maybe it was better. Maybe it was exactly the life I needed. Sometimes I still wonder how different things could have been if Theo had been honest sooner, if I had seen the signs earlier, if we had fought harder, loved better, listened more. But then I look at Lily, her tiny fists in the air as she dreams, her perfect little nose scrunching up when she smiles, and I realize I wouldn't change a thing because every painful, messy, beautiful step brought me here, to her, to this new life, a life built not on lies or fear or desperation, but on truth, on love, on the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. And no matter what happens next, I know one thing for sure. We'll be okay, maybe not perfect, maybe not easy, but okay because we have each other, and sometimes that's more than enough. So now I'll leave you with this. If you were me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed and fought for a man who had already left you behind? Or would you have chosen yourself and the new life waiting quietly, just beyond the wreckage? I'd really love to know, because healing, after all, feels a little less lonely when we share it together.